It's Monday, the 24th of May. The international backlash takes off. EU leaders meet to discuss sanctions against Belarus after a Ryanair flight carrying an opposition journalist was forced to land. Travel rebels. Spain says it's open to British visitors from today, but will the UK's amber warning deter tourists? An anti-racism campaigner critically ill in hospital in London after being shot in the head. COVID canines. The dogs trained to smell COVID-19 and help stop the spread of the virus. Irreplaceable thieves steal silver and gold belonging to Mary, Queen of Scots from a castle in Sussex.
And from midweek onwards, we are going to finally see some drier, brighter and warmer conditions. But until then, there's still some wet weather to contend with. I'll have the details for you later.
A very good morning to you. Governments around the world have condemned Belarus after jets from the Eastern European country forced a Ryanair plane carrying an opposition blogger to land. Officials in Minsk say a MiG fighter escorted the Boeing 737 to the ground following an alleged bomb scare. Well, the leading opposition journalist Roman Protasevich was on board and was arrested when the plane landed. The Foreign Secretary said there would be serious implications, while the head of the EU Commission described it as a hijacking. Our defence and security correspondent, Alistair Bunkall, reports.
This photo of Roman Protasevich was taken in Athens just before he boarded the Ryanair flight for Lithuania. He never got there. As Flight 4978 was about to cross into Lithuanian airspace, it was diverted to Minsk because of a bomb scare. The aircraft was escorted by fighter jets, personally ordered by the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko.
When we received information that there was a civil aircraft in our airspace with a possible bomb threat, the Operational Duty Central Command Post, the Air Defence, was put on high alert. This was done in order to assess the situation and subsequently make the right decision.
Once on the ground, Belarusian police arrested the well-known opposition journalist. No bomb was found on board.
We all were being checked, and they were standing in front of us with guns, and they were just... well, we didn't know what to do because we didn't... They were checking our suitcases, but at the same time, they were arresting the journalist.
Roman Protasevich runs a prominent anti-government blog called Nexta. Following mass protests against Belarus's President Lukashenko last year, the Belarusian government designated Nexta an extremist organisation and put Protasevich on the most wanted list. He fled to Poland for his own safety.
They're not offering us safe skies over which our citizens can fly, and we must therefore immediately stop overflight of Belarus and prevent all flights from entering or leaving that country. We should also immediately ground Belavia Airlines, which is their flag carrier, because it is clearly not safe for them to fly back to Belarus.
The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said it was a brazen and shocking act to divert a commercial flight and arrest a journalist. And NATO Secretary General described it as a serious and dangerous incident which requires international investigation. Lukashenko's political rival, herself exiled in Lithuania, said that she was in no doubt that the Belarusian president was responsible.
Today, Lukashenko personally caused an international scandal, used military aircraft against civilians of Belarus and European countries to reprise just one person. No one else is safe. Anyone could be in Roman Protasevich's place.
The Ryanair flight has now finally landed in Lithuania and a criminal investigation has been opened. This incident will have big international implications because, in effect, the leader of a European country has forced a passenger jet out of the sky under false pretences and for his own political means. Alistair Bunkall, Sky News.
Now, British tourists are expected to head to Spain today after the country said it would welcome visitors who had a negative coronavirus test. But the country is still, of course, on the UK's amber list, And the government here has asked people not to travel to Spain. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Emma Birchley, who's at Gatwick. Morning, Emma. Are we expecting the flights to Spain to be pretty full today, then?
Well, I'm not sure about that. The first one to Lanzarote heads off at 8 o'clock. I have to say I haven't found anyone who's going to be on that flight. There are more flights, however, at around midday to Barcelona, Malaga and to Ibiza. So I shall stop many more passengers over the next couple of hours to see if any of them are heading there. The fact is Spain's very keen to get British tourists, British travellers back there. 18 million people from the UK in a normal year would head to Spain. So you can understand why the Spanish Prime Minister would say he's very delighted to welcome people back. So it means they won't have to have this PCR test when they get there. The problem is that Spain remains on the UK's amber list. So even if you get there without needing a test, you still need a test before you head back to the UK. Then you face 10 days self-isolation at home with tests on day 2 and 8. You can pay for an additional test on day 5. It's called test to release. But what you're looking at still is hundreds of pounds of tests. It is good news, though, for the travel industry. And earlier I spoke to an EasyJet pilot who was heading in. He'd been furloughed until yesterday. Today he was heading out to Edinburgh, Captain Ian Welsh, and he spoke about how pleased he was that things are getting back to normal.
Now, that's great news that Spain won't require a PCR test to travel. It's a huge business for us, travel to Spain, and we're delighted to see that. I think it's going to be slow. It's going to be a slow ramp up, but hopefully there'll be more countries come onto the green list, and we think maybe things will pick up in June, and hopefully July and August will be pretty busy.
Now, as it stands, people shouldn't really be heading to an amber list country just to go on holiday, and the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps urged people to use their common sense. But everyone will be watching to see whether the lists change, which countries are on which list, sometime at the beginning of June.
Hey, Emma, thank you. Well, still to come for you this morning at 7:30, what can the rest of the world really do after President Lukashenko of Belarus forced that plane carrying an opposition journalist to land? At 7:45, we'll meet the team who've trained a group of dogs to detect whether someone has COVID-19. And at 8:20, we'll speak to a UNICEF worker in the Democratic Republic of Congo as hundreds of homes are destroyed in a huge volcanic eruption. Now, a black equal rights campaigner is critically ill in hospital after being shot on a street in London. 27-year-old Sasha Johnson suffered a gunshot wound to the head in the early hours of yesterday morning. Jemima Walker reports.
This is Sasha Johnson, a prominent anti-racism campaigner. She's fighting for her life in hospital after reportedly being shot in the head. The incident happened in Southwark in southeast London. Police were called to an address on Consort Road behind me at just after 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. It is there, they say, they found a 27-year-old woman who had suffered from a gunshot wound. Detectives from the Metropolitan Police's Specialist Crime Command are leading the investigation. In a statement, the Met says, while the investigation is at an early stage, there is nothing to suggest the woman who was shot was the subject of a targeted attack or that she had received any credible threats against her prior to this incident. Last August, Sasha Johnson organised a large-scale march to protest against systemic racism. She told Sky News what drives her activism.
The UK disassociates from racism, but we have to remember the Windrush generation came here. When we're funding war to bomb other countries and people are coming here for safety and rest, then we're fluing them away with our xenophobia. So we're not disassociating from it. We're saying, yes, it's here, but we need to address it now. We're in 2020. We've come too far for racism to still be a problem.
The 27-year-old mother is a committee member of the political party taking the initiative. The party says, it is with great sadness that we inform you that our own Sasha Johnson has sustained a gunshot wound to her head. Sasha has always been actively fighting for black people and the injustices that surround the black community. So far, there have been no arrests. Police are appealing to anyone with any information to come forward. Jemima Walker, Sky News.
Well, let's have a look at some of the other main stories for you this morning. And a set of rosary beads carried by Mary Queen of Scots to her execution are amongst the items missing after a raid at Arundel Castle. West Sussex Police say the gold and silver items are irreplaceable and were taken by force from a public display cabinet on Friday night. At least 15 people are thought to have died after a volcano erupted in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Lava has been flowing from Mount Nyiragongo into nearby villages. It's thought 500 homes have been destroyed. At least 14 people have died after a cable line snapped in northern Italy. Investigators say the cable line broke near the top and the cable car fell to the ground and rolled down a hill. A child was the lone survivor. They were taken to hospital in a critical condition. Italy only reopened a few weeks ago, allowing travel between regions after a winter of COVID-19 restrictions. Former England manager Roy Hodgson has been appointed to the panel carrying out a review of fans' role in football. The group, chaired by former Sports Minister Tracy Crouch, will meet for the first time today. Now, the government's announced it will provide extra support for people forced to self-isolate in 9 areas of England. The money will go to regions with higher rates of coronavirus infections. Ali Fortescue has got some more for us on this. So it's more money, not more money in people's pockets to stay at home, just more money to move somewhere else.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, Labour have long been calling for more financial support. So I think that will be the criticism of this today. But we know that self-isolation has long been a core part of the government's strategy, and there has been concern there haven't been enough incentives to help people to self-isolate. So what this pilot scheme will mean is that 9 areas, including Yorkshire and the Humber, Cheshire, some parts of London, Somerset, will get extra support. It will be tailored for each area. So, for example, some areas will get this buddying scheme, which is about helping people struggling with their mental health if they're having to isolate for prolonged periods of time. Perhaps the most helpful, there will be accommodation that they say will be provided to people living in crowded households. As I say, though, the criticism will be that this comes too late, that it doesn't go far enough in terms of financial support. Matt Hancock, though, saying that this will be a vital way of helping with new variants, and we know that there has been a real problem with compliance when it comes to self-isolation. OK, Ali, thank you. Well, let's have a look at the latest coronavirus data for you. And there have been 2,235 new cases in the most recent 24-hour period. 5 more deaths have been reported, which means the total number of people who've died within 28 days of a positive test is now 127,721. Meanwhile, another 205,410 people have had their first vaccination. 556,951 have had their second. That's the highest number of second vaccines in one day since the rollout began. In total, 60.59 million injections have now been given across the UK. Now, the woman who led the manhunt for Raoul Moat has described the moment she learned he'd shot and injured one of her own officers. Sue Sim was just weeks into the job as acting chief constable when Northumbria police were faced with a double shooting and a fugitive on the run. In our new podcast series, Storycast 21, we look back at the case that defined her career in the full gaze of the world's media.
Hello there, this is the gunman from Berkeley last night. My name is Raoul Moat. What the matter is, I'm not coming in alive. You have hustled with me for so many years. If you come anywhere near me, I'll kill you.
Police are, as we speak, in a confrontation situation with the suspect.
Can I stress to the public that Moat is still at large?
A man fired a shotgun through the window of this house at a young woman inside. A man was then shot and killed on the grass outside.
If there was any change that came to our notice, that we would tell you, the community, because it's important that we have that level of trust with you. I don't know whether anybody who hasn't been in this position can understand what it feels like to be told that an officer under your care and protection has been gunned down. David Rathband was sitting, waiting and hoping to actually stop Raoul Moat. And Raoul Moat had gone up to him and had callously shot him in the head, which resulted in David being blinded.
This was a manhunt happening in real time. Nobody knew what was going to happen next.
At 1:45 in the morning, I got a phone call, which was the worst phone call of my professional life. And she said to me, "Sue, he's shot and we think he's killed one of our own."
This was about to turn into one of the UK's biggest ever manhunts. It felt like being within a conflict zone.
What is a very beautiful, very remote, very quiet, small area, you had the world's media descended on it.
They're doing everything they can to try to find him.
10 years later, I still get stopped by people. It's important that we have that level of trust with you. They believe that I helped them get through this terrible incident.
Police officers just running down now if I get out of the way.
My biggest fears, of course, were not being able to bring Raoul Moat to justice.
You can relive the drama of that manhunt in this week's episode of Storycast 21. That's available now on the Sky News app and via all podcast providers. Now, let's bring you more on our top story this morning. Britain and the United States strongly criticising the president of Belarus after he ordered a Ryanair flight, carrying an opposition journalist to land as it was flying over the country. Dispatching a MiG to make sure it went down. Let's talk to the Business Minister, Anne-Marie Trevelyan. Good morning to you. Look, officially, what is the government reaction to this?
Good morning, Stephen. Well, as the Foreign Secretary said last night, and I've no doubt there will be statements this week in the House, this is unacceptable and we are very concerned by that behaviour. And I think all parties have been very clear that this is a breach of normal international laws, and I have no doubt the Foreign Secretary will make more clarity on his message from last night.
Yes, but he said there'll be serious implications. What does that mean?
So as I'm not the Foreign Secretary, Stephen, I'm afraid I can't answer that question for you. I think it's very clear that the international community has, in one voice overnight, said that this sort of behaviour is entirely unacceptable, and there are, many sanction tools and other tools available to the international community to make that clear. And I have no doubt the Foreign Secretary will speak further to us today.
Yes, but we've got a huge problem here, haven't we? When there were big protests and riots last year, there were asset freezes, there were travel sanctions. And so some of those asset freezes on President Lukashenko and members of his family. None of that seems to have had any impact whatsoever. People on the ground telling us the situation has got worse rather than better.
So, as I've said, the Foreign Secretary will no doubt make more case, but he was very clear last night, as has all the international community been, that this is not acceptable, and the international community will make its views very clearly heard.
Can I ask you about travel to Spain? Spain saying it's going to welcome us all back in now, as long as we have a negative test before we go, then we can go to Spain. But it's on our amber list. What should we do?
So the Prime Minister has been clear that for now, amber means please don't go unless there is an urgent family reason and so on, because we are still trying to slowly move through our roadmap to being able to open up on the 21st of June. And we want to do that in a steady and careful way, which is why we've created the traffic light system, which we obviously hope, if the various constituent parts of what makes a country safe to travel to, moves to green in due course. But amber at the moment still means please don't go unless you really need to, and you will of course have to quarantine at home for 10 days when you get back.
Yeah, but I mean, the traffic light system seems to be a bit null and void now, doesn't it? I mean, it either seems to be green, you can go, anything else you can't.
So we are having to move slowly and carefully, and we want to, away from the we can't do anything, because we are now vaccinating in such an impressive way across the UK that we want to be able to get to a point where we don't have to have those limits, but we want to move in a steady way, make sure we are managing and understanding the risks both to our citizens and the risk they might bring back from other countries, which is why we're doing this in a methodical way. So we have now got the traffic light system, and there are a few countries now green, and we hope very much that obviously the amber numbers will become more green in due course, but the Prime Minister has been very clear at the moment today. That means amber countries really aren't safe to go to, and if you do go, you will...
Well, forgive me for jumping in, forgive me, but I mean, what is the problem with Spain at the moment then? What is the specific problem with Spain that is meaning we can't go there?
So, Stephen, I don't have the details. You'd need to speak to the Health Secretary to get the details of exactly what the specifics are, but it's numbers of cases in hospitals. It's the genomic sequencing of the variants. Those are the pieces of information that our JCVI is using to assess the state of readiness for a country to become a green country for our citizens.
Look, can I ask you about the COVID scheme, this pilot scheme that's being rolled out? It's allowing some people to get extra funding to, I mean, if they live in a crowded accommodation, to be put somewhere else if they're self-isolating. I mean, apart from the fact this doesn't actually give them any more money in their pocket, which would be an incentive to self-isolate in a better way. The problem with this is we're coming to the end of all this, aren't we? This seems to have been brought in 12, 13, 14 months too late.
So this is about, again, where we've seen these sudden increases again from the variant which has originated in India, that we want to be able to help give people the tools, absolutely as many tools as possible, to help them be able to do the right thing and self-isolate. We know that self-isolation as a system is incredibly effective. That's why we locked down and we asked everyone to stay at home. So this is, again, another tool as we try and make sure that we don't see a rise in this new variant spreading through, because it does seem to be more transmissible. It's an opportunity, another tool to help people do the right thing and put themselves out of transmissibility for 10 days. So it's one more tool.
Forgive me, but the Labour Party's been saying for, well, the best part of a year now that, you know, you need to be giving anyone who needs to self-isolate needs to be given more financial support to encourage them to stay at home, to make sure they're not heading out to work.
So there has been all the way through for those who for whom self-isolating was a financial challenge. There was a £500 payment, and these have also all been part of the tools. Those of us who are employed and were able to stay at home, you know, if we were needing to self-isolate, have been supported by our employers, but there have been that £500 payment. And this is as we are starting to unravel the lockdown, which is fantastic news, and that's thanks to our amazing, amazing vaccination programme. We want to make sure that people who do still test positive are able to stay out of the way and keep themselves quarantined for 10 days to try and break those chains of transmission.
Now, I know there's a push today over green technologies and getting more sort of green investment in the UK. And you're talking about £166 million of investment and 60,000 new jobs, which all sounds great. But where does this fall within the 250,000 jobs already announced and the £1 billion of investment?
So, Stephen, this is part of the £1 billion of investment. This is as we start to really work out how we're going to invest and how we're going to help industry to find those solutions. What we're doing is setting out a number of new funds so that in terms of hydrogen supply, carbon capture and storage, removal of greenhouse gases, a whole series of technological innovation areas. These are now the funds being allocated to help businesses to really crack on with finding those solutions for their high-intensity industries.
But it's not announcing any actual new money then?
So it's how it's starting to actually deliver on what in the Energy White Paper and the 10-point plan at the end of last year, we set out that big picture direction of travel. Now we're really starting to get into the gritty detail of helping those high energy industries to decarbonise, because we want those industries to be incredibly successful, but they need to use clean energy. So this is helping them to deliver for their sectors the sorts of innovations that are going to help them do that. So these are a whole series of new programs to help them work that out. This is a team effort. Decarbonising our energy systems is a completely team effort for the whole nation. And these innovations that these businesses come up with will also be those that we can help the rest of the world to help decarbonise too. So it's a very exciting step forwards on our journey to net zero.
OK, Minister, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks to you. Bye.
Well, this is Sky News Breakfast. Let's see what the weather's going to do for you today. And do you know what? Is it toss a coin, Naz, to see where... Because it was like torrential rain and then beautiful sunshine yesterday where I was.
Yeah, and there's more of the same for today and, in fact, for tomorrow as well. But once we get the next couple of days out the way, from around Wednesday onwards, pressure is going to become higher. Therefore, it will become drier, brighter and warmer for most places.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. Well, some good news on the horizon. From the middle of this week onwards, we're generally going to see pressure becoming higher. Therefore, it will become drier, brighter and warmer. Although, don't get too excited. By warmer, what I mean is that it won't feel as cool as it has been, but actually temperatures will be around average for most places for the time of year. Until then, they're well below average for today. It's a chilly start this morning. Many places starting off dry with lots of sunshine, but there are some showers scattered across parts of Ireland, Wales, northwest and southwest England, towards some central and southern England as well, and also some more persistent rain across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. That rain will be sinking its way a little further southwards across Scotland to the central belt, then southern Scotland and Northern Ireland by the end of today. Elsewhere, widespread showers with a risk of hail and thunderstorms throughout the day.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Naz, thank you. Still to come on Sky News Breakfast. How should the West deal with President Lukashenko of Belarus after he forced a flight carrying an opposition journalist to land as it flew over his country?
In December, I was on a video call with a colleague and unfortunately found like a rash going up my chest, which I think was due to some medication I was taking. I rang my dermatologist who told me swollen lymph nodes can happen on this medication. Wait 3 weeks, see what happens. Obviously, the lump never went. In that time, I did the usual of Googling my symptoms, no mention of thyroid cancer. And then eventually I went and had various scans and a biopsy and found out I had papillary thyroid cancer. When I found out, luckily it was on the phone so I could be with my husband, or I would have found out on my own due to COVID. But I was deeply upset, scared. I have 3 children. You think the worst, but my surgeon was really reassuring. Thyroid has a higher cure rate if caught early, and I was just hoping that it hadn't spread anywhere else. I had my thyroid completely removed. I'm now on thyroxine. I will be on that for the rest of my life, and eventually I will have radioactive iodine therapy, which will hopefully kill all the remaining cancer cells. So I'm under amazing care with Adam Brooks. They have been fantastic, so I feel like I'm in the best hands. But to be honest, doing this campaign is what's driving me and keeping me positive. The thought that I could help someone my age realise that how important it is to check your neck. So that is definitely helping, and I feel like this happened to me for a reason.
International leaders have strongly condemned the arrest of a Belarusian dissident journalist after the Ryanair flight he was travelling on was forced to land in the Belarusian capital, Minsk. A short time ago, I spoke to the Business Minister, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who said the actions of Belarus were concerning.
As the Foreign Secretary said last night, and I've no doubt there will be statements this week in the House, this is unacceptable and we are very concerned by that behaviour. And I think all parties have been very clear that this is a breach of normal international laws. And I have no doubt the Foreign Secretary will make more clarity on his message from last night.
Well, let's head to Bratislava and we can talk to the director of the think tank Globsec, Elena Kutsko. Good to see you this morning. Are you surprised that President Lukashenko has been so brazen in his actions?
Even by the standards of the current Belarusian regime, this is a totally new level of escalation and a totally new level of risk that the government is willing to take.
What does it tell us about the attitude of President Lukashenko towards the West in particular?
Lukashenko is sending a very clear message. He cares very little about the international community, specifically the Western countries, and he cares very little about the international norms and rules. For him, his domestic survival is much more important currently. He knows that despite everything that is shown on the state television, he is still very vulnerable. And the only way for him to remain in power is to go after his opponents in any way he can. That's why he is very emboldened in international action. But also he has this feeling of impunity. Over the past year, he was able to get away with quite a lot. The sanctions that were imposed on him are rather not that painful for him. And this is the risk that he is willing to take because the costs for him are still significantly lower than the benefits.
What is the situation in Belarus at the moment? Because we saw the large protests last year in the run-up to the election. But since then, from an outsider's perspective, it seems to have quietened down quite a lot. Now, has the anger dissipated, or is it simply that he has managed to stamp down on the protests?
This feeling of quiet is exactly the image that Lukashenko is trying to portray, but this is rather an illusion. The only way that he has managed to do so is very brutal treatment of people who are trying to protest or who are trying to demonstrate their dissent in any way. This incident with the airplane should not be treated as a random incident that is isolated to the broader developments in the country. Over the past months, the regime has been tightening the screw on the opposition and protesters. Dozens of people are being arrested on a daily basis for charges that range from forwarding a message from a Telegram channel that has been banned by the government to wearing white, red, white socks, for example. The conditions in prisons are very brutal. There are a lot of reports of torture. A political prisoner died last week. But also, it is important to remember that Lukashenko is trying to crack down on the information space. Last week, a major news portal Dubai, has been effectively shut down by the government, with most of the senior editorial team is currently being in detention awaiting trial. So the government does try to crack down brutally, but also control the information space.
I mean, what do you think the international community can do? There's been outrage from the British government, the Irish government, the United States. But if you say that the sanctions last year, the travel sanctions and the asset freezing hasn't really stopped Lukashenko, what more can be done?
Sanctions that have been imposed over the past year are rather limited. They only concern a couple dozen individuals, but also only a few companies. So it's not very painful. So the sanctions to have effect need to be much more painful. It is also important for international community to indicate that what is happening right now and what happened yesterday is unacceptable. This might be very contagious, as other authoritarian governments might have similar ideas. But also, the current case is not only about the developments in the country, it directly affects the safety of the European citizens who were effectively kidnapped for several hours by an authoritarian government. What can be done is definitely a much broader set of economic sanctions imposed on the state-owned companies, but also with people who are known to help Lukashenko perpetrate the crimes domestically. And it's important to do it in solidarity between the European Union, the United Kingdom, but also the United States. There are a lot of discussions whether, for example, the flights and air traffic between Belarus and the European Union should be stopped entirely. I'm not a proponent of this measure simply because it also makes it much more difficult for people, for dissidents to leave the country and potentially puts more people in danger.
In terms of dissidents, we know Roman Protasevich was not living in the country. He'd moved out. But how? There are lots of reports about what his future may hold now. How difficult is it going to be for anyone to keep a track of what is happening to him now?
It will be very difficult. We have no information currently whatsoever about what is going on in his case, where he is, and what is happening to him. The communication with the people who are currently in prison for their political activity is very scarce. They're typically only allowed to communicate through their lawyers on an ad hoc basis or through occasional letters. But there is definitely not much information about what's going on there, saying nothing about what's going to happen to them in the future. In the past, the regime was ready to bargain with the West for the release of political prisoners, but in the current situation, it seems like the regime is not ready even for this discussion. So unfortunately, the fortunes of these people are very dark currently.
OK, Elena Kutsko, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, a senior Hamas leader has told Sky News the group's current ceasefire should hold, but warned there was currently no chance of making peace with Israel. In his first interview since the ceasefire, Mahmoud Zahar, Hamas co-founder, denied that the group fires rockets from civilian areas and said he would be willing to talk to the US President Joe Biden. Well, he was talking to our correspondent Mark Stone, who's in Gaza.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Mahmoud Zahar is back at his Gaza home after 2 weeks lying low. As a founding member of Hamas, he is, for Israel, a target.
First of all, can you tell us the status of the ceasefire? We're a few days into it. It seems to be holding.
Yes, I think most of the important point is the degree of impact on both sides. I think nobody in both sides is looking for escalation more than what happened before. So I believe that it will continue.
11 days of conflict between Israel and Hamas left 260 dead, most in Gaza. Yet Dr. Zahar claims Hamas achieved a strategic and symbolic victory.
The new element here is the degree of the resistant movement, particularly in Gaza, to attack the Israeli targets and at very important points, including most of the overcrowded area in the civilian society. So for how long the Israeli will accept that, I think this is the main issue.
You are firing missiles, rockets and missiles from civilian areas here in Gaza at civilians in Israel. That's not acceptable, is it? That's a war crime.
No single rockets were sent from a civilian area. Most of the rockets from the border.
That's not true, though, is it? Because we've seen video of rockets being fired from within the built-up area of Gaza City at Israeli communities.
This is not against the Israeli community. This is against Israeli occupation. This is against Israeli aggression.
Are you not at least in part responsible for the conditions here? Because you, Hamas, spend your money on weapons, you spend your money on tunnels, you spend your money on fighters. You are not spending your money on the civilian population here.
Give me one example in the world that they have no military ministry to defend themselves. We are here protecting ourselves against aggression, against the Israeli aggression.
Does the state of Israel have the right to exist?
No. Why? Why? You are coming from America and you took my house. You came from Britain and you took my brother's house. This is a settlement. This is a settlement, you are not a citizen. We are the owner of this. This is area, Arabic area, well known. This is well known as Islamic area, well known.
So you are telling me now that you don't think the two-state solution is possible?
Practically, that was proved. It is not my assessment.
If President Biden was willing to sit down with you, with Hamas, would you talk to him?
Why not? Why not? Why not? Mr. Biden, yes, he is supporting Israel, but I think we have a mission as a Palestinian people to speak to him frankly.
It will come as a relief for many that senior Hamas officials believe this ceasefire will hold for now. But like so much in this conflict, the gulf between the two sides remains vast.
Let me ask you one last thing. How would you define peace?
Peace means justice. No peace without justice.
And the prospects for long-term peace as elusive as ever. Mark Stone, Sky News in Gaza.
Well, still to come on Sky News Breakfast. Could a team of dogs trained to sniff out COVID-19 help stop the virus?
They can't go back to Myanmar yet. If they do, they fear they'll be killed. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. If there is a bigger explosion, this area would be in the danger zone. These traffic jams snake for hours up and down this hillside. It means precious aid can't access those in need. You can see the depth of the water. If you have a look in front of us, there are people wading through it. I think experiencing the 2 million person march in Hong Kong, that was a moment.
I don't like the Chinese government. It's cruel.
It was real people power in action.
Police have been firing tear gas and rubber bullets.
See fires all around us here, and just one of them is the size of around 31,000 football pitches.
Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Bangkok.
For the early risers.
As we examine the story beyond the headline.
For the knowledge seekers.
Welcome to Divided States.
For the straight talkers, the curious, and the ones who want to be entertained.
Backstage, Sky News' entertainment podcast.
For wherever you are.
Welcome to Safety Radio on Sunday podcast.
For the ones who want to know more.
Welcome to the All Out Politics podcast.
For the listeners.
From Sky News Storycast.
Sky News Podcasts. Listen and subscribe for free.
Did you know symptoms of hay fever can develop at any stage of life, not just in childhood? The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
There will be widespread showers developing over most of Ireland, England and Wales this afternoon, some of them heavy and thundery with hail. Meanwhile, northern and eastern Scotland will have spells of rain with heavy downpours slowly spreading southwards to central Scotland and Northern Ireland later. It'll be a breezy day too, especially across coastal parts of the north and south, and temperatures will be well below average for the time of year. Pollen levels will remain low for all areas today, mainly due to the unsettled conditions. Currently, small amounts of grass pollen are now airborne. Oak tree pollen poses a risk during spells of sunny, dry weather as well, and spores will increase temporarily after any rain.
The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
Now, a team of biodetection dogs have been trained to smell if someone is infected with COVID-19. A study found the canines are able to detect the virus in people who are showing no symptoms. Well, I love this sort of story. Let's talk to Claire Guest from the Medical Detection Dog. She's the CEO, and James Logan, who's from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Good to see you all this morning. Good to see your pooches as well, Claire. I know you've got a couple there. Look, I mean, how effective are dogs' noses, Claire, in actually detecting any sort of medical condition?
Well, they're incredibly effective, and although Ash is doing a very good example here of a dog who's been woken up too early, they have 350 million sensory receptors dedicated to olfaction. Now, this means they can smell a teaspoon of sugar in the equivalent of 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Us humans can smell it in a cup of tea. So we're talking about a very, very reliable and accurate biosensor. And these dogs absolutely love to work. And at Medical Detection Dogs, we've been working for the last 10 years, finding that dogs can indeed detect the odour of human disease. And this has led to our COVID-19 detector work now.
OK, James, I mean, how confident are you in all of this? I know you've been involved in looking at the data. Oh.
To run the study at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine with medical detection dogs, and yeah, I mean, you know, what we found was that the dogs could detect correctly if somebody was infected with COVID 94% of the time. And what's really incredible about these dogs is that they can do it really, really quickly. So each individual dog could screen up to 250 to 300 people per hour. What we also found was that the dogs were able to detect people who didn't have any symptoms, and also people with a low viral load. So those could be people who are at the beginning of their infection and not really detectable because they don't have any symptoms. So these results are really, really exciting, but you know, we are sort of early stage still. This is still proof of concept. And the next stage is to get out into the field and test the dogs in real world conditions with real people to see just how well they can do it. But certainly a really exciting first step.
OK, so Claire, getting the dogs out and about in the real world, how easy is that to do? Because I mean, how many do you have trained up?
Well, in the first study, as James said, we had 6 dogs that showed the proof of concept, and we've got another 10 dogs that are actually have been trained to detect this virus on people. So wearing clothing currently that's been collected, the dogs have indicated that they are able to do just as well on people as they move around the environment. And of course, scale up is a challenge, but you know, dogs can detect, 2 dogs could screen 300 individuals in half an hour as they got off, say, an aircraft. So we're talking about a very, very rapid test. And this is something that could really change the way in which diagnostics could look, because you could do a rapid screen and then follow it up with a PCR test. And this can make a huge difference.
How quickly do they get nose blind?
We work dogs for about 20 minutes at a time. And this means that they're at absolute peak performance. And then they'd hand over to another doggy team and whilst they had a rest. So they're perfectly capable of working for at least 20 minutes without any problems at all.
Yeah, I mean, in all of this, James, it's all about looking at it's incredible, but you have to look at the practical applications of this. And as Claire said, actually, if you had a team of dogs that could get on every plane and just see if there's anyone on a plane, I mean, that actually could have huge real-world implications, couldn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, what we have to be very clear about is we're not saying that dogs could replace PCR or lateral flow testing or anything like that. You would need too many dogs to be able to do that. But as Claire said, we could screen a plane full of people in half an hour with 2 dogs. What we could look at is whether we can target this method. So, we might be able to screen certain flights that are coming into the UK, for example, but not just flights. In our paper that we've just released today, we did look at airports as one scenario of where we could use dogs, but dogs could be used in a number of different scenarios, including sporting events and stadiums, train stations, maybe even workplaces as well. So the real key to this is the speed. There is nothing else that compares to that sort of speed of screening people very, very rapidly. So there could be lots of opportunities if we can have enough dogs to use in the field, in the real world.
I mean, why do you think, Claire, we've been sort of slow on the uptake on this? I don't just mean with the COVID situation, but I know there are hypo hounds for type 1 diabetics going hypo who don't have symptoms of that. There are cancer-sniffing dogs. There's all these amazing things that dogs can do, and although we've known about it, it's never really taken off.
Well, I mean, that's a very good point. And, at the charity, we've been working for over 10 years now to get an evidence base to actually show that although these biosensors have got a fluffy coat and wagging tail and in case a very fluffy top knot, he is a very, very accurate biosensor. And I think the skepticism is that, well, how can a dog possibly do this? But of course, we use these dogs to keep us safe in terms of finding drugs, explosives, and, they are relied upon to keep us safe. And this is just another application of the dog's incredible sense of smell and his willingness to look for odour. And, the skepticism is slowing things down. We need to get these dogs out there as soon as we can to assist in this fight against COVID-19, just like they assist in the fight against terrorism and explosions. So, this is a very, very serious science behind all our work.
Yeah. Look, I don't want to take anything away from the dogs, James, but is there a way that we can access their sort of natural skill set, their natural physical abilities? Can we adapt that into technology at some point?
Yeah, I mean, this is something else that we're looking at as well. Is how could we develop sensors that could do the job of a dog's nose? The reality is that I personally think that dogs are more capable than any machine that currently exists, from what I've seen, in all honesty. However, we are doing some work on sensors, and I think that that could potentially be another way forward in the future as well. I think dogs will have a role to play for some time, and as I said, the key is that they're so rapid.
Yeah.
The sensor work, the technology is a little bit further behind in terms of the development. So dogs are what we could get out very, very quickly.
OK, look, really good to talk to you, James, and to you, Claire, and to your 2 little furry friends there. And we've not seen much of the lab, but I know he's lurking there in the corner.
I'm sorry, they've not been very dynamic. It's a bit early in the morning for them.
Who can blame them? Who can blame them? Look, really good to see you all. Thank you.